Welcome to the Blueprint Podcast, where we throw out the old blueprint so you can become who you were always meant to be. I'm your host, Jason Smith, and if you haven't already, make sure you click the subscribe button and share this podcast with your friends on social media and tag me in it at JBirdFit. Today, I have a very special guest for you, Anna Axiotis, also known as the Moody Therapist. Anna is a licensed therapist and social media content creator specializing in mental health, relationships, and attachment styles. With nearly a decade of experience, Anna shares her personal and professional insights to help others navigate relationships and personal growth. Her candid approach on TikTok and Instagram has made her a trusted voice in the mental health community. Anna is also the author of an upcoming guided journal for those experiencing breakups or divorce, offering support and guidance for healing and self-discovery. Anna Axiotis, welcome to the Blueprint Podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I should hope that you would be happy to be here. This has been a long time in the making for us. I feel like we've followed each other for, almost 2 years now.
I was thinking about that before we hopped on. It's had to have been at least 2 years. And I don't remember if it was from TikTok or Instagram.
I don't either.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things you find. Yeah, exactly. No, so you find people out in the social media land that you feel just like you resonate with them. It's just like you see their content and you're like, oh, they seem cool. And then you see that there's a lot of attachment style work going on in there. And that's an area of interest for me. And then just the way that you were putting out the information, I felt was really cool. And because at the time you were including your significant other and some of that stuff, and it was like talking about avoidant attachment and like what that looks like and what that means and how that works in the inner dynamics of relationships. And it's one of those hot topics on social media, the avoidant. If you just mention it, people are like, ooh.
Yeah, it's like a swear word almost.
It's like the same thing with narcissists. If you say that, it's, oh, let me tell you about that.
Yeah, definitely.
So how did you first get on social media? How'd that happen for you?
Yeah, I was just like a viewer, just scrolling like the rest of us for a while. And then I had been holding a lot of my own personal stories that led me to the field of therapy for a while. And I was noticing that on TikTok specifically, people were really using that as like an outlet to share relatable experiences. And I, not as a creator or as a therapist, just started sharing some of my own life stories. And I think I started with my divorce, and that kind of took off more than I planned for it, or more than I even maybe wanted it to at the time. So that was my entry into the social media world as someone who was posting my own content, was me just dabbling and sharing like quick little tidbits about things that had happened to me that I knew were relatable, but I didn't know how relatable. And then from there, people obviously engage with your content and they ask questions. And then from there, they were like, oh, okay, so you're a therapist. And then it became my niche. Was I used some of my lived experience to start working with clients who were either going through something similar currently or had just gotten out of something similar.
It's so interesting because we don't often think about what it is that we're creating in the moment. All you intended to do was to share something relatable that maybe somebody will get some value from. Then you put your phone down, you forget about it. The next morning you wake up and you have 1 million views on that
Literally.
particular on that particular video. What was that feeling for you when you woke up and you saw that?
Fear mostly at first, but I think because I had gotten used to the style of mental health TikToks, I felt a little safer on that platform because it did seem very mental health friendly. But when I woke up and saw that it had gone viral, and it was something that I had held close to my chest for so long, I felt very free. Like I felt, oh, okay, so my big secret, or what I thought was like my big secret, is now exposed and it's being embraced, and people were super compassionate about it and supportive. And I think for me, it was like a huge weight was lifted off of my chest, because I thought this was something that I would continue to feel shame about, even though I had done a lot of the work and I had been a therapist for 7 years by the time I had posted about my divorce experience. And I had posted some of my childhood experiences too. But yeah, when I woke up and saw that, it was really freeing. I felt like I could finally just let it go, really.
It's interesting when you start to dive into the comment section because it goes one way or the other.
Yeah.
There's never an in between. It's either
No.
they absolutely love you or they completely hate what you created and you should never create anything ever again
Yeah.
because they're not going to let you forget about it. What's interesting is when I'm in that season now where people are looking at the content and they're like, this is amazing, this is awesome, this has been so helpful. Thank you so much for the way that you deliver the information and you make things easy to understand. And it's
Hmm.
like when you receive that in the comments section, it just like everything else, those other thoughts of maybe I shouldn't be doing this, maybe I should
Yeah.
stop. You question some of your credibility, even though you have tons of it. That's the impact that the comment
Hmm.
section can have on a content creator, especially if you weren't initially intending on being a content
Yeah.
creator.
It was never my plan. Like I didn't even have a link to work with me, or I hadn't posted that I even was a therapist at that point. But I think that if social media had existed when I was younger, I would have left relationships, toxic relationships, a lot sooner. And that was part of why I started to share, was because I was watching other creators and just other, not even creators, just like regular people talk about certain things they had experienced that I had experienced in silence or suffered through in silence. And I thought, gosh, if I saw this video 10 years ago, I think I would have probably had the courage, or at least the information, to leave situations, whether that was relationships or jobs, even, or just environments that I thought I had to tolerate. But being exposed to other people sharing their stuff made me feel like, wow, okay, this was really helpful. So then I thought, I have to start talking.
No, for sure. And that's another one of the comments that I get all the time is that I wish I would have had this information 10 years ago. Where were you 20 years ago? I was with you in the trenches going through all of this stuff and our mess is our message. So as we go through this, as you grow, evolve, and develop, and you decide that, you know what, I need more information. And so much of this is skill set based. It's things that maybe we missed when we were younger. And
Hmm.
now as an adult, you're in this place where a lot of people are like, "What's a midlife crisis?" It doesn't have to be. We get conditioned to say that it has to be a midlife crisis, but it can actually be this awakening at any time period,
Yeah,
20,
I
30,
love that.
40, 70 years old. But you get to this place where you get in touch with some information that allows you to see things, to change your perspective, to shift just your perspective just in the smallest way that allows you to see things a little bit differently. And you begin to look at your past experiences that have led up to the present moment and you start to give yourself a little bit more compassion and understanding,
Hmm.
and maybe you extend yourself a little bit more grace. And then also in that process, it's very healing for you where you start looking at some of the people that were closest to you. And this isn't for everybody, but you once you give yourself that grace, you can look back on those other experiences and the people in your life and give a little bit to them as well. And it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that, oh, we're forgiving and forgetting and doing all of these things. It's just you get to this place where you're like, you know what? I don't need to carry this anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you can embrace the humanness of it. And I think compassion is the ticket out of shame. Like if you've been swimming
Mm.
in shame, then practicing that compassion and facing your inner child or inner teenager or whatever we're referring to, that former version of you, is the ticket out of shame. And I think shame is such a silent monster that can live with you for a really long time and you don't even know why it's still there, but it just makes you feel bad, like you're a bad person, not even that what you've done is bad, but that you are bad. And so I think practicing compassion for me for a long time was hard because it seemed weak. And
Mhm.
for if you're someone who has been in crisis mode because you've been either experiencing trauma or truly in unsafe circumstances, you can't really afford to feel like you do anything that's going to be weak or slow you down. And so it wasn't until I really had started posting that my life was stable enough and I felt emotionally safe enough to actually look in the rearview mirror and go, okay, wait a second, I have been through a lot, I've learned a lot, but a lot of things happened to me that shouldn't have, or that were unfair, or created new wounds for me that I need to address. But I think until you feel safe enough, it's very hard to practice that compassion because you're still just trying to get through the day, or you're just trying to move forward. You're trying to be strong, which can create this hyper independence. And it's very hard to then be soft. And I think compassion requires you to be soft.
Yeah, I really want people to hone in on this a little bit more and recognize that take a breath, right? Because you go through all these different stages in your lifetime, and there's going to be periods where you have this growth and this understanding and this expansion. You're going to feel really good. You'll feel like maybe you have gotten rid of a lot of that shame, and maybe you have, but then some time goes by, a year goes by, 5 years goes by, a decade goes by, and all of a sudden you're back in this place where you were before, and you start thinking, what happened? Because I already went through this. I already took care of this.
Yes.
So what would you tell someone who's going through that, where they're in this place of, I thought I already did all the work and now I'm in this place where I feel like I have to go through it all over again?
Yeah, no, that resonates so much. And the patterns are so worth paying attention to. Sometimes I think people are quick to say, yeah, I don't know, we're quick to absolve ourselves of responsibility
Yes.
in our patterns. And I get it. I want to blame the moon or whatever too.
It's
But
everybody else's fault. I didn't do it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's easy to assume because you've done the work, then you must not be a participant in the pattern. And that's naive of us to think. So I think if you face that, and I have definitely faced that, it's doing the deeper dive on going, okay, what is it? It might not be what is it that I'm attracting, because I do resent this idea or don't oblige this idea that you attract toxic people or that you attract unhealthy people. I think that people that are dysfunctional are attracted to whoever will give them space to exist and entertain. I think for me, it was more about like, why am I staying in these situations? Why am I not exiting them when I do see the patterns that I have worked on to see? When I do see the signs, when I do see the yellow flag, the red flag, why is it that I'm still staying? And that was what I needed to face in my participation of the patterns I was seeing. And
So
that was hard.
why is that?
My mom and my dad, it all goes back to childhood, of course.
Yeah.
What I noticed I was doing, and I see it with a lot of clients, is they want to rewrite the narrative with a different ending. And so subconsciously, you might be drawn to someone that behaves in a similar way or loves you in a similar way to what you're used to. But if the way you were loved wasn't healthy, then obviously that is going to create some obstacles. But I talked about this with Talia, but we all have tolerances that we have acquired either accidentally or we just needed to. So understanding, okay, I can be really patient with someone who flips the switch on me and someone who's inconsistent and is not emotionally vulnerable, because I experienced that in my upbringing often. So that became something I could tolerate. I shouldn't have tolerated it, but I needed to in those instances as a kid. So as an adult, I was noticing I wasn't, even though logically I would catch, oh, that's a yellow flag, that's a red flag. I knew how to handle it though. So it was like, then I'll stay and work on this. And I think that I had to address that there was some deeper part of me that thought if I could get this adult romantic partner to love me correctly, then it would mean that I'm not hard to love and that what my parents showed me was a lie. But until then, it felt like the way my parents loved me must be true. That must be accurate, that I'm hard to love, that I'm difficult to be with, that everyone's going to leave, that I deserve to be put in situations that are unsafe. So if I had a romantic partner that I could fix or that I could rewire the system with, then I was subconsciously proving to myself that what I experienced in childhood wasn't really true.
I think it's interesting when you talk about attraction that we pull in certain things into our sphere of influence. And I think a lot of it is just it's what we're used to.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we have to really think of it any deeper than that, other than you don't need the blame and you don't need all the negative
Hmm.
stuff that kind of goes along with it. It's just, this is what I'm used to. So
Yeah.
of course that makes sense that I would attract partners in that give me more of what I'm used to, because my nervous system, that's what works for me. And
Hmm.
I know how to operate in that environment, and I know how to deal with this type of person. I know how to talk to them. I know their language, right? Our nervous systems are
Yeah.
actually speaking to each other, even though we're both extremely dysregulated.
Yeah.
We don't know what being regulated actually feels, and we don't know
Hmm.
what a conversation would look like with two people who are secure, because maybe you've never experienced it before. And then when
Right.
you do experience it for the first time, when you're around somebody, I just made a meme on this recently. When you're around somebody for the first time that is more secure, you start to find it, you're a little bit odd, and it's, what is this, and I don't know what to do with this, I've never experienced this before, and I don't even know that I would call it
And you
secure
might
because I
not
don't have
like
the
it because
yeah,
it's
I don't have the
uncomfortable.
language. Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. And so you sit there and you push it away and you're like, that's just boring. I don't want that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Most of the clients I work with are working on their attachment style, but I do have a few clients that really are securely attached and they always have been. And we're working on other therapy stuff. But I have one client in particular I can think of, and I asked if it was okay for me to share this, but she was in the talking stage with someone and they were definitely giving some yellow, like borderline red flags with inconsistency. Basically, like she was noticing a lot of incompatibility, but also that they weren't ready for what she was looking for. And the swiftness and quickness in which this woman was like, yeah, no, that I am not attracted to this. I, as a therapist, I've been a therapist for almost 10 years. I was so impressed. And I was like, as a therapist, I was like, this is what a secure attachment looks like. She is not attracted to this person. She gave them a shot, just like I think the average person will give someone a shot. But as soon as she started seeing the inconsistencies, the lack of vulnerability, them not being aligned in a lot of ways, she was like, I'm out. And she didn't stay. She didn't entertain it. She didn't convince herself that she could be the one to change them. She didn't try to ask herself, what could I be doing differently? Because this must be about me. She just was like, yeah, no, good luck. And I was like, wow, this is what a securely attached person, this is how a securely attached person dates.
You're
It
like,
was,
thank you for modeling that for me. That is
yeah,
amazing.
she's also much younger than me. So I was like, wow, good for you, girl.
Yeah, it's huge to be able to do that.
Hmm.
Now, the trick is, how do you get someone who has an insecure attachment to start embodying those traits and getting in touch with their boundaries and their no, their NO?
Hmm. Yeah. I think that it's a combination of behavior work and doing those deeper dive conversations. From my perspective, I have clients come in, and you probably see this a lot too, where they're like, okay, I'm ready to work on my attachment style. It's either anxious or avoidant usually. And so they're ready. They want us to tell them what to do. Like they want us to tell them what to stop doing or do more of. So it's very behavior focused. And I think that is a great place to start because it's action mode. So it gets the wheels turning, like the ball is rolling. But I think until you know why you are also doing those things or why that is your default, it's hard to permanently change it. So I think for people that are wanting to move from an insecure attachment style to secure, the behavior work is amazing because it gets you out of whatever mode you've been in and it lets you practice what the other side looks like. But you're also going to be really uncomfortable. That's when it's going to bring up, and then that's where I think having those deeper conversations, going, okay, what is it like for you to sit with this discomfort? One of the like best examples I can give is reassurance seeking with an anxious attacher. They're operating out of urgency, and I can say we because I've also been extremely anxiously attached before. But when we're seeking reassurance, we want to know right then and there really loudly that we're okay. And most of us are skipping this step of sitting with our emotions of going, I feel unsafe right now, I feel insecure, I feel fearful, I feel abandoned, whatever it is that's coming up. We skip that often and go straight to, tell me that everything's okay. Tell me that you're not cheating on me. Let me see your phone. Like, what's going on? And we demand this reassurance because it will make us feel better in the short run, but we're skipping the part of feeling our feeling. And if you're trying to work on moving out of that, then you have to sit with that. Which means delaying the reassurance seeking, which is really hard for us to do.
Yeah, it's why I'm so anti-texting, and I get a lot of negative feedback regarding that. But you have to remember, I'm a Gen Xer. We grew up without telephones.
Hmm.
We had telephones. We didn't have cell phones. And we didn't have this texting gateway into our soul that is so
People
deeply
didn't have constant access to you.
connected into our DNA. And you're just like, yeah. So you were able to, when you separated from somebody, you actually had to deal with some of the things that you had going on in your own life, or you end up leaning more into your hobbies and the things that you enjoy and hanging out with your
Hmm.
friends and seeking out your support system. It doesn't mean that you weren't anxious and you weren't frustrated and you doubted what the other person was up to. Like those things still exist, but you also had deeper connection with other people in your
Yeah.
life because of that. You weren't so separate.
Which requires you to self soothe because you
Yeah.
have the space to do that. And oftentimes anxious attachments, we're not great at self-soothing because we want someone else to participate. I tell a lot of my clients or couples specifically that I'm working with that usually if it's an anxious avoidant dynamic, then the anxious attacher needs to work on self-soothing and the avoidant attachment needs to work on co-regulating, which is the opposite of what they both would want to do. So the avoidant obviously is going to want space, and then the anxiously attached person is going to want to lean in and you tell me that we're fine, you tell me that everything's going to be okay, you tell me that I have nothing to worry about. It's difficult, but I think that until you really understand why is it so hard for me to sit alone with myself and those feelings and walk myself through them, you can't actually heal the attachment style. Because I can give you a play by play of what to do, but you're like in character mode, you're code switching, but you're not really getting to that deeper secure attachment yet.
And can you give us a bit of a play by play of what that might look like when you're working with someone who is anxious and their partner is avoidant to help bring them back into connection?
Yeah, definitely. So teaching them how to self soothe is about taking space for them. So I tell them anxiety makes us feel like everything has to happen really quickly. We operate out of urgency. So just slowing that down. So I talk to most of them about how do we create speed bumps. And everyone's speed bump is going to be a little bit different, but it's usually some random distraction or something that's going to help slow them down depending on how intense the anxious attachment style feels. Like, so for some people it's very physical, so they might truly need to go for a walk, which is why I love all of your videos. Take a walk with me because I was like, go
How
watch
do you
this video and literally take a walk before you text your
how do you
partner
think
back.
it started?
Yeah, no, it's great. So it was the basics. It's telling clients, you got to go in the other room, you got to put your phone on do not disturb, you have to find a way to shut out the option for you to seek immediate assistance so that you can slow down and sit with yourself and sit with your feelings. And then it's also the basic of what are you feeling identification. Most of us, especially if we've been in therapy for a while, we think, oh, I know what I'm feeling because you've intellectualized them, you've got the information in there. But that's very different than identifying it as it's happening and then sitting with it. So it's taking space, finding those speed bumps, identifying what is it that I'm feeling, and then checking the facts. I think that's super important because anxiety creates a lot of biases. It's flooded with cognitive distortions that are probably going to assume worst case scenario. So checking the facts, what has actually happened versus what am I afraid that's happening right now, is a really big one. And then to take it a step further with what is it that I'm afraid of happening? Has that happened before? And that can go one of two
That's a
directions.
good one.
And so from there, I think that's where someone gets to self soothe and sit with. Now they have some tangible material to work with. Because if I just say, yeah, go in the other room, they're like, what do I do in there? And I remember saying that to my therapist. What do you mean I go to the other room? And she's, I don't know, you might need to cry, but you have to figure out what's happening for you. So I'll give people these prompts now because then it's at least tangible to go, okay, now I'm sitting in my room, I'm going on the walk, and I'm asking myself, what am I feeling? What is it that I'm afraid of? Has this happened before? If it has happened before, then that might signal that there's some trauma there or some sort of a wound that you might be reliving. You might be feeling that again. And sometimes that means it's not about the partner. Sometimes that means that what you're feeling right now is not rooted in present tense, it's rooted in something that you have felt before. And if that's the case, I usually encourage that person to later share with their partner, hey, the other day, something that came up for me, or earlier today, something that came up for me was this. I realized it made me feel similar to the time that this happened to me, if you're comfortable sharing that. And that's going to be where you took ownership and accountability over the feelings that you were having, but you included your partner in co regulating by teaching them something about you that's probably going to help them have more compassion with you, have more patience, and love you in the way you deserve to be loved. But you didn't make it their problem. You didn't make it their responsibility, because in some instances, it's really not about the partner. Now, there's other times that you go in the other room, you're trying to self soothe, you realize, okay, objectively, there is something here that I need to address with the partner. And it's a win, because if that's the case, you're already at least a little calmer by the time you go back to the partner. So your delivery is probably going to be more appropriate. And if that's the case, then I'm helping clients walk through this idea of, okay, what is it? What's an unmet need that I don't have right now? And we're quick to say reassurance, but what is it that you are wanting to hear, or that you need to experience that you haven't? What's going to make you feel safer? What's going to make you feel seen? Because a lot of this is also about being seen. It's not even about just tell me that it's going to be okay. It's about, I need you to see me right now, what I'm experiencing and why, and that you can take this information and do something with it in the future.
Yeah, you just gave us so many good things there. The one thing I want to hone in on, is this true? And how true is it?
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it, we get stuck in this place of the anxiety takes over and you're feeling it in your body and it's just going all the way around. You feel it in the center of you. Your heart's going, you can feel it in your neck and you know that something's off, but you don't know what it is. And then we go to this, you're in crisis mode. We go to the worst case scenario that it has to be this. And so you quickly reason all these things out of why it has to be this thing, not fully recognizing that this is part of a story. It can also be part of a pattern. Right now, you're shifting into you're making something up because you don't have any evidence to support, and maybe you do, but you
Mm-hmm.
don't have it for this particular person in this current moment, right? You don't necessarily know exactly what they're doing or where they're at or anything like that, but you can tap into and recognize that, oh, this because of this, what I'm feeling right now, it's actually from a year ago, 5 years ago, 10
Yeah.
years ago,
Yeah.
whatever it
What's
is
it
for you.
reminding you of?
Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
it could be as simple as you had a conversation with your person. Maybe you saw something on TV or you heard
Yeah.
something or it
Oh
was a
gosh. Yeah.
smell.
Anxious attachers should not watch a lot of the shows and like documentaries that are out right now. I am very picky about what I let myself watch, but I've talked to a lot of clients. If you're already leaning anxiously attached or are anxiously attached, don't watch the documentaries about I didn't know who I was married to.
Yeah.
That's not going to help with what you're addressing right now. It's going to, there's a lot of information in our brains that we don't choose necessarily to think about, but it's on the back burner. So if we have a moment where someone puts their phone down weird or doesn't text you back, now you have a lot of data in there that you can pull to be like, it could be this, and that might not even be your world.
Yeah. But then you can also get to this place of, okay, so I recognize that it's from the past, has nothing to do with my current person. So I can give myself some grace in this moment because I'm feeling all these feelings. But then I can also say, okay, I need to come into connection with the person that I'm currently with and have a
Hmm.
conversation. You get to invite them into a part of your world. And of course, through that process, you're creating trust with the other person
Yeah.
because now they don't feel they're not defensive, they're not
Right.
angry. They're not going, hey, I didn't do that to like, why are you blaming? What is going on right now? They're confused. And then we get all this miscommunication through that process. And now you're coming
Yeah.
to them with, hey, guess what? I'm going through something. And if you're able to hear it right now, I'd like to sit down and tell you what I'm experiencing. And
Yeah.
you have that conversation. And now the other person feels so much closer to you
Hmm.
because they begin to understand your inner world. And that helps them in the future to be able to navigate different situations with you, knowing full well that it's like, oh, that's what you're experiencing right now. Great.
Absolutely.
And I can
Yeah.
ask you different questions and we can get into this a little bit deeper together.
Yeah. Which is healing for the person too. that has experienced whatever they did in the past, because now they're being embraced and they're receiving compassion and support for whatever that old wound is. And that, like you said, it builds security, it builds trust, but you also now gave your partner an opportunity to support you and show up for you, instead of assuming that they're a new participant in whatever old wound that you have. And sometimes we don't give our partners those opportunities because we want to jump to a conclusion, and you're really interrupting their ability to show you what they're like when you're struggling. So I think obviously there's lots of different ways your partner can respond. And I do tell people to pay attention to that, because if you do appropriately come to your partner, and I'm talking you're calm, your delivery is not combative, it's not accusatory. You say, look, this is what was going on for me earlier. This is what has happened to me in the past. It brought this up for me. If your partner at that point is like, why are you telling me this? I don't care about this. If your partner's, you're met with judgment, or they're just uninterested and they're mean to you at that point, you should definitely pay attention to that. But a lot of the times that's not the case. And they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that happened to you. Or wow, thank you for telling me. But we would interrupt that whole cycle if we can't get into this blueprint.
Yeah, so much of it is you're trying to create certainty in the moment. Again, you don't give the other person the opportunity to show up with all the tools and skills that they have, because what you have to recognize is the person that you're currently with is not any other person that you've ever been with in your lifetime.
Yes.
If you give them that opportunity to show up for you, even though it can be hard, it's extremely difficult, because you are extending a little bit of trust and you are being a little bit
Yeah.
more vulnerable than maybe you're used to. But you might be surprised at what they come back with, and
Hmm.
just the compassion and the emotional availability that they actually have. But
Yeah.
you've been in this place of a self-fulfilling prophecy and pattern for so many years and decades that you don't know how to get beyond that. So you end up creating those same circumstances over and over again, and you're the perpetrator of your own pain in that process. And it's
Absolutely.
really hard to get beyond that. So if you can find that person that they don't hit you with the resistance and they don't get
Hmm.
defensive and they're willing to listen, man, is that a great place to be. It can be so
And
healing
you
for
won't
you.
know if they're that person unless you give them an opportunity. So,
Yes,
yeah, which is huge.
it
Yeah,
is.
I have a lot of clients too say, how will I know if I'm dating an avoidant, or how will I know if I'm dating an anxiously attached person? And it's, you won't right away. You won't know. You have to have time and experiences. And it's not unusual that in the early stages of a relationship, we're operating a little bit differently. That doesn't mean always that someone was being, attempting to lie to you and manipulate you in the beginning. Most of us are like, attempting to really put our best foot forward. So it's through these conversations and through these vulnerabilities and these times where we all have triggers. So you just have to take the opportunity to be like, okay, it's happening. And I'm going to choose to utilize this as an opportunity to practice what I need to work on, but also to give my partner an opportunity to show me what they're like when I share something vulnerable or difficult or scary for me. But until then, you really don't know what it's going to be like.
Yeah, you have to think of it like intelligence gathering. When we get into relationships with people, you want to take your time, get to know them, take in all of this information, give them the opportunity to experience different things with you. And you end up going through some certain trials and tribulations together, but you're gathering all this information that allows you to make decisions for yourself in the future. It goes back to that secure client that you had, where
Hmm.
you start to get in touch with the experiences that you want to have and the experiences that you don't want to have. So now that you have all this information, you can go inward and be
Hmm.
able to use that to make a better decision for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I do notice a lot of people, if they are working on their anxious attachment, they will attempt at times to overcorrect they'll learn like some of what I was just sharing, and then they'll try to overcorrect by telling someone really early on everything that they should know about them
Yeah.
and what kind of triggers they have. Do you see that too with some clients
Yeah.
where,
Don't do that.
yeah, don't do that for lots of reasons.
Yeah.
It's not a race, first of
No.
all. And but again, anxiety makes us feel like, okay, let me do everything really quickly and efficiently, because then I can protect myself from pain or rejection or whatever. So I'll have clients, and there's been times in my past I can relate where it's okay, you're dating someone new or even just talking stage, and you're like, let me tell them all of these things that would trigger me or these things that I've experienced, because then they'll know right away. So it'll be easier.
Yeah, and if you
And
don't like it, then leave.
yeah,
Right? It's like,
and that becomes, yeah, the overcorrected attitude of like, fine, then who
yeah.
cares? Then I don't want you anyways. And it's, I do think vulnerability needs to be earned. You do want it to also exist at a pace that is appropriate. So anxiously attached people will oftentimes vet their dates after they've dated an avoidant. Usually they're like, okay, now I need to know that you can open up to me. So on a first, second, or third date, they're like, tell me everything, while they are also sharing a lot of things that don't necessarily need to come up super early on and shouldn't, because you haven't established at least the foundation I think that should be required in order to open up in some of these vulnerable ways.
And here's another interesting part to that is when you're anxious and you're doing that and you're sitting across from somebody who is more secure in their attachment, they're looking at you like, I have never seen this before. And this is
Yeah.
not cool.
Well,
What is
yeah,
happening
it's
right now? And then you're left as the anxious attacher when they say they don't want this, right? When the
mhm.
securely attached person says, you know what, this isn't for me, and they let you down nicely, then you say, oh, you must be avoidant. And it's
Yes.
like,
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And oftentimes, as we're working on getting to a more secure place, we will assume that something secure is avoidant. So
yeah.
we'll hear it all the time. Oh, like I'll hear a client say, I'm in my avoidant era. And I'll be like, talk to me
Mm,
about that. What does that mean? And they'll describe what a securely attached person is often. But it feels avoidant because it feels so different from the way that they were operating. So they just assume that anything that is going to feel vastly different is must mean that they're avoidant. And like you said, being a securely attached person is about being able to be vulnerable and take risks. You trust yourself through the process. It's not a race. You're allowed to give time. You move at a speed that is appropriate for everyone, because you're not flooded with emotion, but you also don't have an aversion to closeness. So you're able to give the person in the relationship the amount of time required for it to happen in an organic way that actually is then sustainable.
yeah, you're not racing to commitment and certainty.
Yes. But
You're
if you are severely anxiously attached, you might even think that a securely attached person is avoidant of commitment, even though they're just moving at a pace that makes sense.
yeah. So you had mentioned date them until what was it?
Date them till you hate them.
Yeah. So you had mentioned date them until you hate them. Can you
Hmm.
explain that for us?
Yes, definitely. I heard the term on TikTok, so it's not
Of
my term.
course.
But I immediately knew what they were talking about because it is something I can relate to. But I think this theory is essentially describing that for some people, especially those of us that are anxiously attached that have a very hard time exiting a relationship, for some people it makes sense, even though it's grueling and excruciating. It might make sense to date them till you hate them. And what's happening during that process and with this theory is that you are observing what's really going on, and you're probably documenting on some level some things that have happened or unchangeable facts and experiences that have occurred, so that when you do finally leave, you don't go back. Because the alternative, if you're the type of person who has a hard time exiting relationships, the alternative is that you go back and forth several times, sometimes eight or nine. So this theory is going, don't do that, just stay until you will not go back. And I do have a lot of clients. It's a weird, like, hot take. Like, I'm not necessarily promoting that everyone should do this, but I do think if you recognize that you're the type of person that will resuscitate a dead body several times in a relationship, and you are like, I am going to try even harder when I notice that it's not working, then this concept might actually make sense for you. And it's about seeing what's actually there and staying until you really get to the point where you're like, I cannot live like this. I cannot do this. And until you hate them is like, it just rhymes. But you don't have to hate them, but you have to hate the way that you feel and the way that relationship is operating enough that you're like, I would never go back. But a lot of people will leave earlier on, and that's great if you're the type that can leave and then be done. But if you know that you have a pattern where you will leave and then hope that they change and hope that they call you and then you will go back, then it's worth it for you to consider that you might need to stay, open your eyes, document everything that you're remembering through journaling or with a therapist or a coach, have someone that's essentially your partner in that. And then by the time you leave, you've tried everything, you've seen everything that you've needed to see, and you don't go back. And then you move into actual detachment.
What is detachment?
Detachment is going to be an intentional space where you decide, I am going to remove the attachment that I either did have or felt that I had, and I'm going to practice centering yourself at that point and health, and probably your, I think it's really important to have a healthy support system during that time. But detachment is going to be that intentional choice of going, I am breaking free from this because it is the smartest thing for me to do. But it's not usually because you wanted to do it. And I think people will wait until they want to. And that's really, that might be forever.
Yeah, and if you're in LA, you might do something that's called a energetic cord cutting ceremony,
Yeah.
right? You're just
Yeah.
from a spirituality perspective, and you're getting rid of those energetic cords from that person so that you can
Yeah. But
finally
it's
allow
really,
yourself to
it's
move
just a
on.
choice to be like, I am choosing to be done with this, even though I don't want to. It's a lot of grief work too. You're grieving the relationship that you would have or that you wanted to have or that at one point it was. That's, that's extremely hard.
Yeah, can you go a little bit deeper into the grief portion of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think that a lot of people will avoid grieving a relationship at times because they don't want to miss the person that they have just exited the relationship with. So grief is going to be about, obviously whatever it is that you're missing currently, but it's also about grieving what you thought would happen. So all of the life and milestones and visions that you had for how it would have looked if you guys didn't break up or if you had stayed married is what you're also grieving. And the reason why it's important to recognize that is because people will be confused that 6 months, a year, even 5 years later, they're tripped up by emotions of, oh my gosh, why am I feeling something from a previous relationship when I feel like I'm over them? And that's grief. That's grief of, wow, I thought that at this point in my life, I would already have kids. Or, wow, I thought at this point in my life, we would be buying our first home. Or, I thought that when I come home after a long day from work, someone would be there sitting with me. That's grief when you're recognizing these moments of, gosh, I thought this was going to look different. And then if it's connected to a specific person that you thought would be the person doing that life with you, that's where you have to grieve that this isn't happening and it's okay that you wanted it to. It's a combination of facing reality but also giving that version of you compassion that, like, that it is sad that it didn't work out. That's fair that you wanted it to. And a lot of times we try to be really, I think, really firm. It's no, fuck that guy. And it's like that that sucked. You
Yeah.
love that person probably, and you did future trip about what it would look like. And that's what that other side of grief is. It's not just going no contact and then never talking again. It's, what does that feel like when someone who you thought would be your forever is now a stranger? That has to be processed.
Yeah. Have you ever gone on a relationship fast?
Yes. And
Yeah.
I highly recommend them
No,
to
I
everyone,
I think
but
they're
especially,
great,
yeah,
especially if you have an insecure attachment.
yeah. I also think that while you're doing your relationship fast, though, to lean into your peer relationships with your friends can really change the way you date. I am a true introvert, so it's easy for me to hang out at home all the time. So
I'm
I
with you.
have to be really intentional about being social, especially I work from home. So I really could just hang out here all week. But when I started to like date my friends a little bit in a way where I decided there was a lot of things that I would wait for a partner to do with me or that I would hope a partner would do with me, that when I was on my relationship fast, I was like, a lot of these things I can do with my girlfriends, or a lot of these things I can do with someone that I just have a friendship dynamic with. And truly only friends. I hope no one takes this and goes, oh, I can do this with my situationship. That is not what I mean. I mean
It
people
is
that you
not the
are
same
friends with.
thing.
Yes. But it changes the way you date, because you realize that a lot of what you reserve for a romantic partner, you can get your cup filled by someone that is also just choosing to love you as a friend or a family member, even. And it eventually helps raise your bar for what you would tolerate in a relationship. So if you date yourself and you date your friends while you're on this relationship fast, by the time you re enter the dating world, your cup is pretty full. So then you are able, from a better baseline, to assess, okay, what is it that I am looking for, that I am still missing in my life, that I could experience romantically, but it's no longer putting a lot of pressure on that romantic partner to meet all of your needs, because you now are operating out of a place where you are pretty full already.
No, I agree. And I love the idea of dating yourself. And people look at that and be like, yeah, that's weird. I don't know about that.
They
But
think it's cheesy, maybe, but
yeah, call it whatever you want. Just call it a relationship fast, or just say, I'm not dating, or, whatever it is for you. It really
yeah,
doesn't matter what you call it, but spend some time by yourself and understand what it truly means to be alone. You're not lonely, you're just alone. And so you
yeah,
fill your life with all of these other things. And maybe you take the solo trip. I did.
yeah.
It was years ago. This was like 2016. I don't have people that would want to go on the trip with me, and there's really not anybody that I would want to
True introvert.
for an extended trip. So I flew out to Vegas, and then I hopped on a bus and went to the Hoover Dam, and I had my nice expensive camera with me, and I got all these great shots, and the bus went off and we went to the Grand Canyon. I met people on the bus and had all these amazing
Mm.
conversations, and you get to learn about other people's their lives, the things that are important to them, and they're from all over the planet. And it's just we all came together on this little bus to go to this location and take this 2-hour drive
And that's
from
connection. You
yeah.
still experience connection, even though you were alone with strangers who enjoyed the same thing as you, that were at the same place as you.
Yeah, and then you realize that as big as the world is, it's also very small. There are so many opportunities out there for you to connect with people who are going to resonate with who you are as a person. And when you're alone, it gives you the opportunity to really evaluate the time that you spend with people and the relationships that you have. You start asking some deeper questions, some existential questions. Is this in support of my highest good? Is this relationship
Hmm.
moving me in a direction that I really want to go, or is it hindering my growth? And you start to grow, expand, and develop in new and different ways that you didn't really think were possible. So I
Yeah.
encourage people, take the fast if you're willing to
Hmm.
do it.
Absolutely. I could not stress that enough, especially if you have been anxiously attached. I think that's super important, because you're, and with my clients, I'll call it like chosen solitude, which allows you to experience the difference between solitude and loneliness, because I do think that they're very different, but most of us will lump it into the same feeling. And I think if you can learn to enjoy solitude, then not only are you probably more likely to be able to self soothe on your own, but once you are in a partnership, you are going to be more independent, which is going to allow you to maintain your identity and not chameleon into whatever you think that person wants of you. Or and I think, again, like, people that lean anxiously attached, we it's a great skill sometimes, but we can chameleon into what we think that person wants or what we think we should be. And
If you're a
then we
bird,
end
I'm
up
a
with someone
bird.
we're not compatible with or aligned with. Even take away like they don't even have to be toxic or unhealthy. It could literally just be like, we're not compatible. You're not a bad person, I'm not a bad person, but if you chameleon too hard, then that can happen. And I think you're more likely to fall into that if you haven't experienced solitude in a way that you were able to end up loving and embracing and going, wow, I know myself now in a way I wouldn't have known if I hadn't chosen to spend time alone with myself.
Yeah. You finally get in touch with your goals, your values, and your standards, not just for your life, but for the people that you choose to do life with. And
Mhm.
then very quickly, when you start dating again, you begin to realize that, you know what? this actually isn't for me. And it doesn't take
Yeah.
you long to get there. And you can recognize like certain behaviors are just, it's a no. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's actually a really great place to be. And people complain, yeah, but the dating pool is so much smaller. Yeah, that's
Good.
the point. That's the
There's less
point. That's
people to
good.
weed through then.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a bad thing. The scarcity mindset, though, can really create that also sense of urgency that anxiety already gives you. So if it's a scarcity mindset of either if I wait, then who's even going to be available, or I'm getting older and what's that going to look like? And I get it. I think those are fair factors to consider. But if you're deciding between healing versus jumping back into something because of the scarcity mindset, you're more likely to end up in the same pattern then because you haven't created that gap. I think as much as possible, you want to achieve a baseline where you really have wiped the slate clean and go, okay, what is it that I am looking for truly? Not what is it that I'm familiar with, not what is it that society tells me I should have, not what is it that I'm being offered, and then I'll pick the one that doesn't suck the most. Because that's what happens too. Is I'll just pick the least worst option. That's not going to work either. So clean the slate, take the break. There's not like a set amount of time I think it even has to be, but it's just about, do you know yourself enough to know who you are aligned best with and what you operate best with? Paying attention to who brings out what side of you, because relationships can bring out a different side of us than even our friends can or work can. And going, okay, what do I want my relationship side to bring out in me? Not what did it used to bring out or what usually happens, but like what I like for that to look like. And then seeking things that align with that is super important.
Interdependence
Mm-hmm.
for
But that's
sure.
when people might think that now they're an avoidant because they stop dating. And it's like,
No, because they're
no.
going to listen to this podcast and they're going to
Yeah.
realize that what interdependence is the way to go. When you feel confident and capable in your relationships and you know that you can part ways with somebody because you made a very conscious decision to be with this person and that you've traded novelty for loyalty and
Yeah.
you've come
That's, I like
together.
that.
Yeah, and you've come together for this and you're doing this intentionally. And it's that intention that really matters. I always use the language of a shared mission and vision. If you don't have a shared mission and vision, you're going to suffer in your relationships. You have to know where
Yeah.
you're going, what you're doing, and the why behind why you're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And that's a dialogue that has to continue, right? Because people talk at the beginning of a relationship. Oh, what are
Yeah.
you looking for? What do you see? And it's keep checking in on that though, because we all evolve.
Yeah.
You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to need something different. We should all change within a relationship to some capacity. So keeping that dialogue open, I think, is crucial because sometimes people feel like we checked all the boxes. Let's like run full steam ahead. And it's about keeping those lines of communication open too.
Yeah. It's such a shame when people they spend 10 years of their lives together, but they spent 10 years growing apart.
Mm-hmm.
Because they didn't have that check in, that 1, 3, 5, and 10-year plan together of what we're actually co creating. And I try to get people to use that type of language. We're creating and we're co creating
Yeah.
with one another. We're actually building something that's going to be sustainable and for the long term. Not everybody likes that language because it's really difficult to really allow that to be a part of the way that you speak to other people and embody that
Mm-hmm.
inside of yourself.
Yeah. And finding a partner who doesn't, their mindset or perspective isn't that these check ins are work or it means something bad is happening if we have to check in. I don't care what your attachment style is, but if you value self development and improvement, then being able to bring that in from that lens is going to be a game changer because there are people that are like, why do we have to talk? I already know everything about you. And that mindset is going to create more obstacles than if someone has the mindset of, yeah, I want to know how you're feeling. And every couple is different. I've worked with lots of couples where we have to figure out a frequency or a style that's going to work for them. Sometimes it doesn't have to be a formal check-in. It doesn't need
Yeah.
to be like, okay, babe, like it's 4 o'clock on Friday. Let's talk about what feelings we've had this week. It doesn't have to be like that. I usually tell couples to incorporate it in a date night, but have an idea of what kind of takeaways or information do you want to leave knowing that date or that month or that week that is going to allow you to continue being aligned with your partner in what you're co-creating, but also be seen and heard because it's normal. I don't care how close you think you are with your partner. we all have inside thoughts. We all have inside feelings that we haven't shared, and deciding to be vulnerable intentionally throughout the relationship is important. You don't have to wait for something bad to be happening. You can just be like, this week, something that happened to me that I realized I didn't even share with you was this, and it was great, or it hurt me. And I think having those check ins with a partner who doesn't dread them is going to create the environment that you probably need to be able to keep doing what you're doing.
Do you have any couples in the public sphere that you admire for the way that they've cultivated their relationship? Or maybe in your personal life?
No, and I think that's because I try not to romanticize what it looks like, because I also don't know what else is going on. So I guess
Right.
there are couples that Taylor Swift and Travis Kelsey, think I actually think if you look at
How
them
did I know you were
from,
gonna say that?
you knew it. You already knew I was Swiftie.
I
And
was
I was like,
thinking
no, I'm not gonna say it. I'm
Alex
gonna say it.
Hermosi and Layla Hermosi.
They're both very independent,
Yeah,
but they also both show up for each other in
yeah.
a way that does competition. And I also think before they got into this, I think that when I see couples operating really well, the ones that I admire are usually the ones that really have their own thing going on. Like they've got, it doesn't have to be career, but like they've got their own hobbies or interests or lifestyle that would continue to exist with or without that partner. And I think that's super important. But when I love watching like a lot of dating shows and reality shows from a psychology perspective too, because it's interesting to get in the minds of these people. If you are someone who is looking for a muse or someone that you can replicate a relationship by or model it off of, I always tell you, you also don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So take the parts that you admire and learn that and understand that. Like, for instance, with them, yeah, I like that they both have their own thing. They spend time apart. They also show up for each other. That's something I know that I need, but I also don't know what their conversations look like. So I think it's good to have examples and models that you're aspiring to be similar to, but pay attention too to all the information that you don't have. We don't really know what it's really, or we don't know what they had to do to get to that place.
And a big part of it is gonna be mutual respect.
Yeah.
And this is why when I'm working with people, I go straight for, what do you admire about the other person? What are 10 things that you just absolutely
Mm,
adore about them? Because it's really easy to get to this place of like blame and anger and resentment. And these are all the things
yeah.
you're doing wrong. And it's okay, but you married this person, or you've been together for 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is. What do you admire about them? What do you like?
Yeah. And what
What's
did you admire at the beginning? And then what does it look like
yes.
now?
Uh,
Because sometimes people will be, well, I loved how independent they were. And then one of the very things that they fight a lot about is that.
yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So it's
Oof, that's a big one.
what do I admire in my partner? And then how do I help them maintain that? And how do I not end up resenting that? And that happens again for all different attachment styles. I think there's things that at the beginning we're like, oh, I love that you do this. And then later you're like, oh, why do you do that?
And one of the biggest things is we get together. Oh my God, I admire all this stuff about you. Now I need to change you. Stop going to the gym at 5 o'clock. I want you to stay in bed with me and hang out for a little bit. And it's just,
Yeah.
and so like slowly but surely, because the person ends up acquiescing, to you
Yeah.
because they want you to be happy and think this is what you need, then yeah, I'm going to do this. But now the other person is diminishing themselves in that process. And then you're creating this big ball of resentment that just builds over time.
Yeah. One of the things that I will do with clients, if we're essentially practicing the date them till you hate them theory, meaning they've already decided that this partner probably is not the best fit for them, but they also are having a hard time leaving. What I'll tell them is stop prompting them, stop asking them to change, stop reminding them of what you've asked for, stop begging them to do that thing that you guys talked about a month ago that you said would change the game. Pay attention to who they are when you're not constantly critiquing them, telling them what to do, and giving them feedback, because that's who you're in a relationship with. And I only tell people to do that if they've obviously already attempted repairs and they've attempted to speak on what their unmet needs are and things like that. But if you're in a relationship and you have that pit in your stomach knowing like, I should probably leave, I should probably end this, but for whatever reason I'm not ready to, stop prompting your partner. Stop trying to change them. Stop begging. Stop reminding them of what it is that you need, because you've already said it. And then see if you can date that person, or see if you can stay in a partnership with that person. Because we need to decide to stay with who our partner actually is, not who we want them to be or who they were for a month when things were going good.
Yeah. Stop dating potential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Especially if that's your pattern, you constantly
Yeah.
say to yourself, but they have all of this potential. Every relationship has all this potential. Of course they do, because what you're really witnessing and what you're experiencing is all the love that you already have to give. It's everything that's already
Yeah.
inside of you. And so you're just choosing this person to be the vector of all of this love that you have to give. And you're just like, here you
Yeah.
go. But that comes with you even after that relationship ends. That's something that always exists
Yeah.
inside of you.
And listen to what your partner is saying, because it's not unusual for someone to tell you why it won't work.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that will say, it's really hard for me to commit. And then you will date them for 8 months, but they told you on date 2 that it's hard for them to commit. And then you'll be like, why is it so hard for you to commit? They literally already told you that. Or what also can happen is, if you're already in the relationship, there's a lot of times that someone will say, I'm not going to change. And you will dig your heels in deeper because you really want them to, because of this potential thing. But they literally just told you that they don't want to change, or that they won't. Hear them, let that resonate and soak in. But again, if we're operating out of anxiety, not only are we not really in the present because we're in our heads and we're probably in the future or the past, but we're not hearing some really important information that we should be utilizing to make a decision on what our current reality is. Again, take away the potential. But one of the best things that one of my exes did was straight up said to me, I am not going to change. And it was at the end of it. And I was, part of it's because I'm a therapist too. So I'm still like, okay, but we can try this and this, and we haven't tried this. And what if we do this? And what about that time we had that really good month back then? And he was like, Anna, I'm probably always going to be like this. And it wasn't until I heard him and believed him, because he had probably said that to me before, but I probably didn't believe it because I thought I could be the one with all my schooling and all of my own history. I can be the one to change you. If someone tells you I'm not going to change, believe them.
And then ask yourself, why do I want to change people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And chances are it's because if you do, that will mean something about you. That will mean that you are capable of changing the narrative, or that you are capable of experiencing love, or that all the other people that wronged you, now this person has made up for it because this one worked out. So it's usually, it is
I'm
like a,
worthy when you choose me.
mm-hmm, yeah, I'm worth changing for.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you can just get to that place where you believe people when they tell you who they are,
Yeah.
and you recognize that your worth is already inside of you, and you've always been worthy, whole, and complete, and you don't need another person to tell you that you are worthy of love, then
Mm-hmm.
you begin to recognize that, you know what, that's not for me. Thank you for telling me
Yeah.
that.
Which is what you would feel like if you had a secure attachment. Absolutely.
Anna, I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast today. Tell
Thank you so
everybody
much for
how
having me.
to reach out to you so that they can work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. On TikTok, it's Anna Does Therapy, and Instagram is, I rebranded. I'm the Moody therapist
I
now.
love it.
Thank you. And I do have a breakup/divorce journal that I'm launching in 2 weeks. That's going to be, I think, really neat for people that either are already in therapy or coaching, or they're like, I want something that's going to help me through this transition, but I'm not ready to talk yet. It's a guided journal. It's very raw. It's from my own journals through my own divorce and breakups, and also, like, obviously all of the things that I've learned as a therapist. But I think that it's going to be a new way for people to examine some of these patterns and behaviors so that they can really heal on a deeper level.
Awesome. And as soon as you have that, send me the link and I'll make sure
Definitely.
that I get it in here.
Yes, I will for sure.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.